truly glad to see you all here this evening, particularly given the fact that we know the World Series is being televised at this moment. And I'm very grateful to you, Nathaniel, and the entire Wellness House team because of the important work you do, the meaningful programs you continue to provide, and for giving me this opportunity to speak to obviously a very motivated group to come here. Because in the next minutes, I'm going to climb up on a soapbox, so to speak, and I'm going to marshal a strong scientific argument for the essential role of biobehavioral components in a program to actually effective cancer treatment, medical outcomes, and survival. It is not just some ancillary consideration. That's a nicety, compliment. It's more than that. So yes, I am Penny Block. That's my real name. I had a teacher who didn't think Penny was an appropriate name. Penelope, she tried to label me with, but it's Penny. I answer to my first name. I am, as Nathaniel explained, Executive Director of the Block Center for Innovative Cancer Treatment. And also, I'm the Director of Integrative Services, so I really support everything we've been doing. Keith and I officially opened our doors in June of 1980, and gosh, more than 36 years ago. So in that time period, we witnessed a dramatic era of change in medical thinking, medical practice, and obviously in patient expectations, which is why you're all here. You know that you need more than just drugs and conventional treatment alone. We have learned that there is a difference when you can combine conventional in an innovative way and what's considered complementary. But let me say this, despite the change that's gone on, if we're going to be honest with ourselves, we have a long way to go before every single person diagnosed with one of the cancers is provided with a genuine integrative plan of treatment that is systematically individualized. And that's something that we keep hoping is going to happen all across the United States. So my main disclosure, as I climb up on the soapbox, is that I have an agenda. I want to dispel any lingering, unconscious notions that place biobehavioral, psychosocial aspects of care as sort of an afterthought and only give it lip service. Because there's a lot of double speak going on in the world of integrative oncology. And I want to give you an example of what I mean. So Keith and I and Dr. Charlotte Gyllenhaal, our director, we have a research team working with us, attended the first conference, the annual conference for the Society of Integrative Oncology. Note the name of the group. And we were slightly disturbed, in fact, quite upset, when the keynote speaker walked up to the podium and he said he would allow that integrative cancer treatment was about helping patients and not just biobehavioral practices, but feeling better and getting better. Now that's important, but he was adamant that actually helping patients get better was the exclusive domain of conventional meds. We know that is what is doublespeak. I don't know, a lot of people are too young to know what doublespeak was, but several decades ago, doublespeak was when they called bombs peace missiles. So you can't be the Society for Integrative Oncology and treat what we would consider integrative as just complementary health. And we have data showing not that we have the magic wand or the answer to cancer, but that when you combine these in a systematic way that is individualized, in other words, tailored to what each person needs based on their biochemical, molecular, when I say biochemical, if you will, profile, I'm talking about inflammatory levels, I'm talking about insulin dysregulation, oxidative stress, immune status, which we test for and needs to be understood so that a plan can address those specific needs. And then you have better survival data. To be intellectually honest, we looked at our data and it made a difference. Again, it's not a magic wand, but it can certainly change the odds. So what is biobehavioral? Well, actually, biobehavioral is this dynamic interconnection among all of these personal factors that have to do social networks and interactions, behavioral lifestyle patterns, environmental impact, and subjective states, and how their combined impact affects medical outcomes. So these are just pictures. I sometimes feel like this poor guy that's racing through his day and his schedule, but we all know tonight getting here was a mess. So we all have to deal with these different things that affect us, and lo and behold, they have an impact even on molecular pathways in cancer. But the good news is we can counter the effect. So the problem is that biobehavioral components or programs are typically treated as a sidebar, like a nice add-on. And I say, why? Because here's this drum that I'm going to keep beating louder. You're going to get so bored of hearing me. I do apologize for that, but it should be a core component, and that is based on good science. And that's what I want to show you. And for every patient, it's critical to his or her effective treatment plan. So why then is this biobehavioral or psychosocial aspect, as it sometimes has been called in the past, given lip service? By the way, my doctoral work at the University of Chicago is in biobehavioral oncology, and I particularly focused on it because I felt it was kind of pushed off to the side and dismissed instead of going on with the medical degree. But at any rate, so why is it given lip service? Well, first of all, this psyche-soma interaction, your mind-body, is kind of an old, tired discussion. And so people go a little ho-hum when you bring it up. The other thing is, it's a poor fit in biomedical model. We understand infusions, we get tablets and capsules, we get diet, and even the physicality of exercise. But these sort of more subjective things, how does that fit? Well, I intend to show you. And the other thing is, even some of my closest friends and family have often in the past referred to this psychological disease link as soft science. Again, there's evidence. I'm going to show you what hard science it is. So, I'm crossing these out in this talk. This particular slide is just a reminder that all of these components, conventional therapeutics, we do conventional drugs, but we have found a way that, based on multi-site studies in Europe, following circadian rhythms using chronomodulated pumps, I'm not going to go off into a discussion, but just to let you know that it showed 50% less side effects and toxicity. And this was with the initial multi-site studies that with great data were with metastatic colon cancer, but in ovarian cancer it was found using these pumps resulted in a 400% better 5-year survival. So unfortunately, I think we're the only private North American clinic using these pumps, but at any rate, so we do conventional drugs. Therapeutic nutrition makes a huge difference. Physical care, we know exercise, and I'm going to talk more about that in terms of how that can affect reduction in symptoms, side effects, and better treatment outcome. There are certain nutraceutical and supplement regimens. We do a lot of research with this. I don't want to get off. But just to say that you need to work with somebody who really knows their stuff, because they can couple really well with different drugs to diminish toxicities and to make certain aspects of it more effective. But for tonight, this is what I'm focusing on deliberately. These are not separate, if you will, complementary practices. There is a synergy between all of these. And that's, again, my point. So, biobehavioral program. And I think you may even end up with a handout that really outlines what a biobehavioral program is. Yes, very fundamental to biobehavioral strategies is a relaxation technique that works for each person. It's as fundamental to good health as eating vegetables instead of sugar donuts to take your serve. And it's as fundamental to the biobehavioral plan or system as I'm saying vegetables is to the dietary program. And we know they all work together. That's continually what happens. And I have this wonderful team that I work with on my staff, and we really are collaborative. This is our center. Actually, these are infusion rooms. I really am showing you this to say that we don't wait until after a patient is done with treatment to get that person involved in a full system of, as I've said, integrative care. This woman, it's a wonderful story. She came in, and by the way, I don't need to be promoting us. I'm sorry, I just banged on my microphone. But I just want to promote what you all need and deserve, and that you need to get. And we can have conversations about how to do that. But one of the wonderful things is the Wellness House. And the Wellness House provides a lot of the biobehavioral, so many other things as well. I just wish that every clinic had this. But the Wellness House is as outstanding and extraordinary as you are, Nathaniel here and the whole team. There aren't a lot of wellness houses across the United States. And there aren't a lot of places where people have access to what we consider important. Anyway, I started to say this when we came in. She had an oxygen tank. She could not stand up. And it was a great concern. In about 3.5, maybe it was 4 weeks, we all worked collaboratively. Diet, exercise, this is not in lieu of medicines. And she was able to take this railing and bring herself down carefully on her own to a meeting that was taking place in this lounge area. Now you see her working out on an exercycle. There's her chemo bag, and she's just able to do much more. So we like to hear that each person who may be in treatment or may be out of surgery is rebuilding physical and emotional stamina that is necessary. We don't run typical support groups. I know there's a lot going on here. We call it Strategies for Success. It's really like a brainstorming session because the patients and their support people become experts. Everybody here becomes an expert in how do you implement all these health behavior changes. And the neat thing is that people have a subjective sense when you do implement them, they feel better. We humans, very likely, will make significant health behavior changes with a medical alert. But we're not going to sustain those changes unless we have a subjective sense that we feel better, maybe we look better, and that helps us sustain it. So anyway, this is really brainstorming. So I have a handout, and I just split it up a bit because to frame my argument, I kind of asked this rhetorical question when I was use better survival outcome. We have data showing not that we have the magic wand or the answer to cancer, but that when you combine these in a systematic way that is individualized, in other words, tailored to what each person needs based on their biochemical, molecular, when I say biochemical, if you will, profile, I'm talking about inflammatory levels, I'm talking about insulin dysregulation, oxidative stress, immune status, which we test for and needs to be understood so that a plan can address those specific needs. And then you have better survival data. To be intellectually honest, we looked at our data and it made a difference. Again, it's not a magic wand, but it can certainly change the odds. So what is biobehavioral? Well, actually, biobehavioral is this dynamic interconnection among all of these personal factors that have to do with social networks, interactions, behavioral lifestyle patterns, environmental impact, and subjective states, and how their combined impact affects medical outcomes. So these are just pictures. I sometimes feel like this poor guy that's racing through his day and his schedule, but we all know tonight getting here was a mess. So we all have to deal with these different things that affect us, and lo and behold, they have an impact even on molecular pathways in cancer. But the good news is we can counter the effect. So the problem is that biobehavioral components or programs are typically treated as a sidebar, like a nice add-on. And I say, why? Because here's this drum that I'm going to keep beating louder. You're going to get so bored of hearing me. I do apologize for that, but it should be a core component, and that is based on good science. And that's what I want to show you. And for every patient, it's critical to his or her effective treatment plan. So why then is this biobehavioral or psychosocial aspect, as it sometimes has been called in the past, given lip service? By the way, my doctoral work at the University of Chicago is in biobehavioral oncology, and I particularly focused on it because I felt it was kind of pushed off to the side and dismissed instead of going on with the medical degree. But at any rate, so why is it given lip service? Well, first of all, this psyche-soma interaction, your mind-body, kind of an old, tired discussion. And so people go a little ho-hum when you bring it up. The other thing is, it's a poor fit in biomedical model. We understand infusions, we get tablets and capsules, we get diet, and even the physicality of exercise. But these sort of more subjective things, how does that fit? Well, I intend to show you. And the other thing is, even some of my closest friends and family have often in the past referred to this psychological disease link as soft science. Again, there's evidence I'm going to show you what hard science it is. So, I'm crossing these out in this talk. This particular slide is just a reminder that all of these components, conventional therapeutics, we do conventional drugs, but we have found a way that, based on multi-site studies in Europe, following circadian rhythms using chronomodulated pumps, I'm not going to go off into a discussion, but just to let you know that it showed 50% less side effects and toxicity. And this was the initial multi-site studies that with great data were with metastatic colon cancer, but in ovarian cancer, it was found using these pumps resulted in a 400% better 5-year survival. So unfortunately, I think we're the only private North American clinic using these pumps, but at any rate, so we do conventional drugs. Therapeutic nutrition makes a huge difference. Physical care, we know exercise, and I'm going to talk more about that in terms of how that can affect reduction in symptoms, side effects, and better treatment outcome. There are certain nutraceutical and supplement regimens. We do a lot of research with this. I don't want to get off. But just to say that you need to work with somebody who really knows their stuff, because they can couple really well with different drugs to diminish toxicities and to make certain aspects of it more effective. But for tonight, this is what I'm focusing on deliberately. These are not separate, if you will, complementary practices. There is a synergy between all of these. And that's, again, my point. So, biobehavioral program. And I think you may even end up with a handout that really outlines what a biobehavioral program is. Yes, very fundamental to biobehavioral strategies is a relaxation technique that works for each person. It's as fundamental to good health as eating vegetables instead of sugar donuts to take an absurd scheme. And it's as fundamental to the biobehavioral plan or system as I'm saying vegetables is to the dietary program. And we know they all work together. That's continually what happens. And I have this wonderful team that I work with on my staff, and we really are collaborative. This is our center. Actually, these are infusion rooms. I really am showing you this to say that we don't wait until after a patient is done with treatment to get that person involved in a full system of, as I've said, integrative care. this woman, it's a wonderful story. She came in, and by the way, I don't need to be promoting us and promoting, I'm sorry, I just banged down my, my microphone. But I just wanted to promote what you all need and deserve, and that you need to get. And we can have conversations about how you do that, but one of the wonderful things is the Wellness House. And the Wellness House provides a lot of the biobehavioral, so many other things as well. I just wish that every clinic had this, but the Wellness House is as outstanding and extraordinary as you are, Nathaniel here and the whole team. There aren't a lot of wellness houses across the United States, and there aren't a lot of places where people have access to what we consider important. Anyway, I started to say this when we came in. She had an oxygen tank. She could not stand up, and it was of great concern. In about 3.5, maybe it was 4 weeks, we all worked collaboratively. Diet, exercise, this is not in lieu of medicines. And she was able to take this railing and bring herself down carefully on her own to a meeting that was taking place in this lounge area. Now you see her working out on an exercycle. There's her chemo bag, and she's just able to do much more. So we like to hear that each person who may be in treatment or maybe out of surgery is rebuilding physical and emotional stamina that is necessary. We don't run typical support groups. I know there's a lot going on here. We call it Strategies for Success. It's really like a brainstorming session because the patients and their support people become experts. Everybody here becomes an expert in how do you implement all these health behavior changes. And the neat thing is that people have a subjective sense when you do implement them, they feel better. We humans, very likely, will make significant health behavior changes with a medical alert. But we're not going to sustain those changes unless we have a subjective sense that we feel better, maybe we look better, and that helps us sustain it. So anyway, this is really brainstorming. So I have a handout, and I just split it up a bit because to frame my argument, I kind of asked this rhetorical question. When I was teaching med students, I lined up a whole bunch of things that were going to be on their test about what was affected. But just to say, I'm not going to go through explaining all of it. You can look through it at your leisure. But anyway, the question is chronic, unrelieved. Those are operative words. Stress or distress is linked to each of the following. And you could mentally or put a check mark into the next, to the consequences that you feel are relevant: cancer promoters, glucose disruption, insulin resistance, which is really relevant to cancer, cortisol dysregulation, which can lead to excess cortisol. And it was found that flat diurnal cortisol was associated in a breast cancer study with shorter survival, reduced natural killer cell numbers and activity. And the natural killer cells are the troops in the immune system that lyse or disintegrate those cancer cells. So we need them. We need those troops in big numbers and strength. They need a general to direct their traffic, but that's critical. Increased pro-inflammatory response, cytokines such as IL-6 and others. And we know that inflammation is implicated in just about every medical disorder. It is highly relevant to cancer. So, again, chronic stress and distress means the continual flood of catecholamines, in this case, for example, adrenaline, which can turn an existing cancer into a more aggressive disease. The evidence about stress causing cancer is inconsistent. However, in an existing cancer, this is the reality. So we need to have relaxation techniques. We need to do things that counter this flood of adrenaline. Now, I'm going to talk a little bit later, and actually in just a minute or so, about how not all stress is bad and what constitutes problematic stress. So again, the question goes on. Chronic unrelieved stress or distress linked to cancer promoters, elevated levels of VEGF, which you may have read about. That's vascular endothelial growth factor. It's a molecular factor. When it's elevated, it's not good. It promotes what's known as angiogenesis, which most of you have heard of, which is vascularization of new tumor sites. So it's sort of feeding new tumor sites. Therefore, disease progression. It does promote indirectly in the next metastases. Resistance to an evasion of something known as apoptosis. Apoptosis is that natural cell death. Healthy cells, when they become senescent or damaged, they die off and are replaced by healthy cells. But those cancer cells really fight to stay and not be kicked out by apoptosis. And then increased rapidity, potential, and speed of metastases to distant tissue, and growth of tumor mass. So yes, all of these are linked to chronic unrelieved stress or distress, but a systematic biobehavioral program counters these cancer-promoting stress hormones and actually helps boost patient survival odds. There's the good news. Now, I started to say that not all stress is bad. So I'm going to tell you that pitcher tonight, when he got up there and was ready to pitch for the Cubs, let's say instead of Cleveland, whatever, it doesn't matter, has got to have adrenaline pumping through his body. Just like the Olympic athlete does who's at the top of slalom. However, it's the chronicity, it's the unrelieved, it's the stuff that we do to ourselves in the middle of the night. We all do it as humans. Trying to solve all the world's problems, but everybody else is asleep and can't be there to help us. It's that triggers this ulcer, this continual flood of, say, adrenaline. And cancer itself, and the treatment, and your schedules, and medical appointments, and scans, that also increases the kind of stress hormones. So stress might not look like this, chomping on a steering wheel. It might not be holding your head in your hands, but maybe this. Quietly worried or distressed. Is there bills to pay, job security, surgery concerns, sexuality, and something that one author titled Scanxiety. He says he is somebody who has been dealing with cancer for several years, and he says he has a love-hate relationship with his scans. So he goes into a scan. First of all, he has to wait for the report, then he gets the report, and if he hears that his cancer is stable or it seems to be diminishing, he's like, it's a hallelujah. He got an A+, he can leave, the weight off his shoulders. And about 4 or 5 months later, he's looking at his calendar and trying to plan a trip or some event and buy tickets. And he notices he's got another scan coming up. So he calls this Scanxiety. Now, a friend sent this as a birthday card, and I just called it Screenxiety. Yeah, if women rule the world. Yeah. Oh, all right. Well, you want me to hold it for a second?
Yes.
Oh, goodness. Okay. No, it was wonderful. It was a birthday card from somebody I've become friendly with, one of our patients, out and out for a few years, and she just howled when she saw it and saved it for the mammogram. Got it? Susan? That's terrific. Okay. So, one of the things that causes a tremendous amount of distress is that cancer is so darn uncertain. We humans don't like uncertainty, of course. And let me tell you something. Oncologists and other MDs, they really dislike uncertainty more than we really will. Because they're supposed to be the experts. So we go to them, and in the consulting room, whether it's spoken or tacit, there's a question there, which is, what do you think, Doc? And Doc doesn't really know. He doesn't know about Penny, if I were sitting there. All he knows is he's got to come up with some kind of answer. So instead of saying, I really don't know about you, Penny, but here's this descriptive statistic. It's called the normal curve, normal bell curve. It's really just, as I said, a descriptive statistic. And all of these, and by the way, this is not an accurate representation, and not really making the slides showing the right proportion. But all of these are data points of people. He could say, I don't know, Penny or Josephine or whomever sitting there. But let me tell you, there is what's known as a right leg coming on here. And that right leg has data points, people. And it can go out decades. And he could say, to be medically responsible and scientifically accurate, he could say, you can be in that right leg. But often they don't say that. They say there's 10% here, you do this, 50% there. But better yet, there are outliers. And outliers are people who do not fit data points. And there are lots more than this. As I say, I'm lousy at making these slides so they're accurate. But they're people who don't fit neatly underneath this bell curve. When I've looked at the data and most of the research that fills this up with these averages, they're very often people who just kind of stoically resign themselves to conventional meds alone. They're not investigating and researching as you are for other information to try to do more, to change this internal environment, this molecular change, this biochemical change, that can foster better health and sort of disease. But here's what you need to know. We do not have a bell curve for people, truthfully, that seem to be like you, who are looking for more. A comprehensive system that actually fosters health and not just address disease. So chronic stress hormones, I'm going to come back to this, but produce resistance of cancer cells to chemotherapies, protect malignant cells from normal cell death, increase the rate of metastases to distant organs, leading to cancer progression. And this you have something later on, but just to mention briefly, that some of the medical benefits of the relaxation response, they can help increase cytotoxic activity in natural killer cells, relieve symptoms of chronic pain, it's a big deal, significantly reduce nausea and other difficult side effects of treatment that often throw people prematurely out of effective treatment. Reduce, even interrupt what's known as anti-aggregating inflammatory cascade. And I mentioned how key inflammation is in cancer. Help regulate insulin and glucose response, reduce insulin resistance. By the way, very relevant to breast cancer and other cancers. I want to clarify, just because sometimes people ask me, sugar doesn't cause cancer, but cancer cells guzzle sugar, sucrose, at about 30-fold more rapidly than healthy cells. So we're very careful about the types of sugar or sweeteners that people use and help people to reduce insulin resistance. Alleviate damaging consequences, oxidative stress, diminish chronic stress hormones such as adrenaline, I've already been pointing to that, assist desirable DNA repair mechanisms, produce a change in cancer-promoting gene expression to help bound and regulate metastases factors. That I'm going to come to. I want to break this down for you. I don't want to just skip through it. Are you too long? Maybe, is anybody else too long? Yes, you got a couple of people. Thanks, Anthony. Usually I'm the one doing this. Okay. So, one potential consequence of this flood of adrenaline is a kind of chemo-resistance. And in colon cancer cells were resistant to frontline drugs like 5-FU and multi-drug therapies because of that adrenaline. And in frontline drugs for breast cancer like doxorubicin, paclitaxel, and adrenaline made the cancer cells resistant to those treatments. Potential consequence too. I don't want to stress you about stress, but I'm coming back with good news, I promise. Catecholamines allow these malignant cells to escape the primary tumor site, and then adrenaline seems to protect those breakaway cancer cells from being destroyed by apoptosis in this By the way, I give you the science. I don't want you to think I'm making this up as I'm going along. First of all, I'm not that creative, I can assure you. A third potential consequence of the stress hormone cascade is it leads to a metastatic switch in breast cancer and in other cancers. It actually enhances the speed of distant metastases. It's been shown to induce a 30-fold increase in metastasis to clinically relevant distant tissues and organs like lymph nodes and lung. If you have a question, let me know. Honestly, I don't mind being interrupted. Yes?
So when you refer to breast cancer, is it all types of breast cancer or a specific type?
This was an animal study. I don't know if they did ER positive and ER negative, they got into all of those. But it looked like it just made those breast cancer cells resist what would be given as frontline drugs, which is the paclitaxel and doxorubicin. And they don't always use that with triple negative breast cancer. So I don't know. It's a good question. I got to find out. Remind me and I'll get back in touch with you.
Sure.
Okay. It also showed a 37-fold increase in lung metastases and a 67% increase in lymph nodes. So it's just a reminder that neuroendocrine dynamics have a potential to regulate gene expression with hard science in many cell types in the tumor microenvironment as expression. Okay, here's the good news. Yes?
Can you repeat what you said about sucrose and breast cancer?
Oh, just saying that some of the cancers are more, insulin dysregulation is relevant to all cancers. It might be a little more relevant to breast cancer.
Did you say something about 30 times something? Or?
Oh, cancer cells, yeah, they guzzle, sucrose 30-fold more rapidly than normal healthy cells. So when you go in for certain scans, you get this noxious sugar drink because those cancer cells just swallow it down. I mean, I'm being figurative language. And that's why they light up on scan, because they're active cancer cells. So, but I really have to emphasize it's not that sugar causes cancer. It feeds cancer.
Thank you.
Would that it would be that simple. Anyway, so this is a game changer. It's a good news. An 8-week study that was conducted by a team of researchers at Harvard Medical who looked at 2,209 gene expressions. That's how those genes behave in our bodies. It is not a genetic predisposition. And they taught every adult in the study a technique that worked for her or him to elicit what's known as the relaxation response. And there are different ways to get there. There's relaxed abdominal breathing, many of the things you've learned here and know. There's progressive muscle relaxation. I'm going to take you through that as a review or move if we have time. There is a focus meditation. There are certain yoga postures. There's imagery techniques. There are a number of ways to get to this relaxation response, which is the antithesis of the stress hormones or the stress response. Anyway, I won't get into how this term was first introduced because I'll get off track, but it was due to a cardiovascular specialist and surgeon. He's now Professor Emeritus at Harvard Med. Anyway, these researchers looked at these 2,219 expressions, and at the end of the 8 weeks, those adults who were participants in the studies, 8 weeks, who had practiced the technique that worked for that person every day, really a critical factor every day. And the researchers wanted it to be 20 minutes a day, but it averaged only 17 and a half minutes a day. Not a lot of time. At the end of the 8 weeks, those participants had produced a change in gene expression that inhibited specific cancer-promoting factors. It's a wow. Something that produces the relaxation response. This was, and I'm going to show you some other slides later, this was replicated in other studies with other populations. Now, I beat this drum loudly. To me, any medical clinic that does not make sure that every person has a technique that works for that person to elicit this relaxation response. It's a shift from the sympathetic to the parasympathetic. It's a shift when you have sort of your heart pounding more, or high blood pressure, and heart rate, and et cetera, to a calmer state. I am going to say this again. I'm adamant that any medical center that doesn't make sure each person has technique that works for that person and encourages it to be an everyday practice, I think is medically negligent. It would be as stupid as telling you to go eat sugar donuts as long as you get the right amount of calories in a day, you know, with or without cancer. So it's something that I really am emphasizing. They also found, these researchers, that it counteracted cellular damage from chronic stress. It interrupted what's known as the NF-kappa-beta inflammatory cascade. And again, I keep mentioning why inflammation is so important in this discussion, and diminished insulin dysregulation. I'm just showing you this to let you know, these are heat maps that the research team looked at. They could see what was upregulated in terms of these genes and downregulated. It was fabulous information. So now that I've talked about the problems with stress, how prevalent is it among cancer patients? Well, it's very prevalent and very normal. In fact, as much as 50% of cancer patients may experience substantial emotional distress, which can be clinically significant anxiety and depression, and many decades beyond diagnosis. The rate of depression among cancer patients is actually 4 times that of the general population. But I'm going to emphasize and make it clear, even though distress is common, it is not psychological illness. It's the understandable and normal response to the abnormal circumstances of cancer. This cancer is a disruption in biography, or your narrative, or someone's narrative, or expectations about tomorrows, and changes a lot. It's a disruption in biography as well as biology. About 47% of women diagnosed with breast cancer experience moderate to severe emotional distress of various types. And as many as a third of those women might still suffer up to 20 years after treatment. It doesn't necessarily all go away. And in fact, I didn't have time to make a slide, but one of the pieces of research that came in my inbox is that nearly 1 in 5 cancer survivors, we like calling them thrivers, is taking medications for anxiety and depression. And survivors who were a decade or more past their diagnosis are all using these medications at a rate double the general population. So, yes?
I'm sorry. So are you saying that the cancer causes the anxiety?
I'm just saying having the diagnosis, having to go in for treatment, having to have scans, having all the things that get affected from family life to et cetera, et cetera.
Oh, no. I was
But-
wondering if the other was first, if it was, people with depression, anxiety.
No, that's
something like-
inconsistent. No, that evidence is really inconsistent. That's what I was saying. But, so this is just a reminder that just because somebody has completed treatment or come out of successful surgery, that we don't just let those people wait until the next scan, passively sit and wait. We don't. We use that as an opportunity to optimize health and optimize benefits of treatment. We can't forget all the things that may follow on the heels of very potent medicines, etc. I sort of alluded to this earlier, but due to severe psychological and physiological distress associated with receiving chemo, about a third of those receiving chemo will abandon chemotherapy prematurely before treatment cycles are completed, and that has been found to lead to shorter survival. So we've got to diminish side effects. We've got to make sure that people are not feeling continuously worried, not getting stuck in what are normal thoughts and worries. But do we know when or if patients are suffering silently? Probably not. Well, because you walk into someone's office and you say, John Smith, how are you doing today? And he says, good, doc. And in many ways, he's really doing well. He goes to work every day. He's still engaged with family and friends. He comes for treatment without failure. But he's probably suffering silently. Not probably, but can be. And we can't allow that. So I have this refrain, we have to screen and intervene and actually make sure that everybody has access to new tools without sounding, I hope, glib. You know, if we buy a car or rent a car and the gauge says there's a problem, we open up the glove compartment, take out the operator's manual, and we get it fixed. But where's the glove compartment and operator's manual for cancer? So we have to feel we're equipping every individual appropriate to that person with whatever they need to get healthy and live well, even in the midst of treatment and beyond. So why doesn't the medical team know? Well, there is kind of a silent collusion sometimes between doctors and patients. First of all, assumption that these problems are inevitable with diagnosis and treatment. But now today, it's the pressure of limited time and focus for sure. And doctors get little training to address these cancer-related distress concerns. There's a belief that emotional difficulties are just not in the doctor's purview. But the worst, most insidious of all, is this crazy credo of positive attitude. It's not so constant today, but when Keith and I first opened our doors, there was this horrible dictate. You were supposed to stay smiling and upbeat 24/7. And it was almost like a moral imperative. People were really worried. If I don't stay smiling 24/7, it might have an adverse impact on my disease. Well, no. But first of all, even without cancer, how does any sensitive, sensate human being stay smiling and upbeat 24/7? Just not possible. Then you add all the complications in. It's just absolutely wrong. And the science tells us, no, restricting emotions. Women who put a lid, and men who put a lid on difficult thoughts and feelings, actually did not fare as well or live as long, according to one of my really, well, somebody I respect a great deal in terms of research, who looked at these in sort of a four-part matrix. And those people who put a lid on it and may have been silently and metaphorically wringing their hands without anyone knowing it, didn't live as long. So learning to manage the flux of emotions, which can be steep and deep, and not get stuck in the dark places. So equipped so not to get stuck there, they're the ones who live the best. In fact, one of the women who's been beyond treatment with us for, I can't remember how many years, we were out at UCLA presenting, and she walked up to me, and she lives in Los Angeles, and she says, you know, occasionally there's still somebody who tells me I'm supposed to stay smiling and upbeat. And she said, you know, they're well-intentioned, but I think it's for their comfort, not mine. So recognizing that. Anyway, it's restriction of emotions plus chronic anxiety can be a dangerous equation, leading to increased mortality. Now, I want to tell you there's a drastic difference between this positive smiling attitude that people have to face on their face and determination. Determination is any one of us can feel knocked down and leveled some days, but get back up again, metaphorically speaking, brush off our behinds and go forward. And it's determination that is the matter. So if you get stuck in dark places, you've got a great place to come. You can let a number of people know, because you need some new tools. That's all. Nothing wrong with it. But there's another reason for screening and intervening. First of all, the primary mandate of medicine is to eliminate human suffering. So we definitely don't want someone privately having a really hard time and not equipping that person better. But second of all, there's a practical reason. Good research showed that this is, HADS is the Hospital Anxiety and Depression Scale. It's a 14-part pen and paper questionnaire that our chemo patients, chemo patients, because we want to know. Because the higher the depression score, it's a subscale, 7 questions, the poorer the response on the pathology report. And the higher the anxiety score, that's another subscale, 7 questions, the poorer the tumor response. Meaning, instead of tumor regression, significant or whatever, there's less response to chemo. And what's really important is when they combine the 2 scores, or when we combine anyway, the 2 subscales, the total emerged as a sole independent predictor of clinical response to chemotherapy when controlling the medical variables. It's a key indicator, so we watch that and intervene with patients, and you can do the same with yourself. So I've told you about all the stress consequences. Unrelieved psychological stress can lead to dysregulation of key biochemical, molecular, and metabolic factors. But if distress is detected, addressed, and treated, different outcome, or more importantly, when every patient is furnished with fundamental approaches that can be used. So here's something that makes the statement. I'm going to try out different kinds of research just to reinforce this. I said this is not soft science in many cases anymore. This is a biobehavioral component or program, and it was researched with an RCT, randomized controlled trial, which is the gold standard of the modern scientific method. And Barbara Anderson and her team at Ohio State University did a study with 227 women with stage 2 and 3 breast cancer. And it was an 11-year longitudinal. They looked at the median data, 50% this side, 50% that side. And they found at the end of the 11 years that those women in the intervention group that got their progressive muscle relaxation and many other supportive kinds of approaches had a 45% reduced risk of breast cancer recurrence, a 56% reduced risk of death from breast cancer in 11 years, and a 49% reduced risk of death from all causes in those 11 years. And when the researchers went back after the 11 years to look at their data again, they found that even if there was a breast cancer patient who had a recurrence, those who were in the intervention group still had almost a 60% reduced risk of dying compared to the control group. So these are facts we're reviewing. It says this is critical. This is not even combined with a carefully controlled diet. It's not combined with a physical therapist that does real physical programming strategies, and it wasn't individualized. So it's a problem. And I mentioned this earlier, this game changer coming out of Harvard that has been replicated elsewhere to remind you of what you can do with a simple relaxation technique if you practice it every day. And then basic relaxation techniques. I'm going to speed through this because I'm going to tell you in a minute. Simple relaxation practices like progressive muscle relaxation. Any of you do this? Yes. Okay. I might be able to take you through it. I know that I can give you a handout. Thank you for it. But and I can even refer you to something to it. But anyway, this simple practice, progressive muscle relaxation, in a randomized controlled trial, while people were concurrent with their chemo, they found that there was a 30% increase of these natural killer cell numbers and at the strength of activity following 1 month of daily progressive muscle relaxation practice. And I remind you that those NK cell numbers, those NK cells, rather than natural killer cells, are the ones that lyse or disintegrate cancer cells. And that was unlike the control group. The control group had a reduction in numbers and activity to be expected, because certain chemotherapies will suppress certain members of the immune system. So this was pretty impressive. Another benefit, 2-month program of this relaxation training with ovarian cancer patients increased desirable lymphocyte levels unlike controls. And that's even during myelosuppressive chemo. So those are things that affect the cancer itself. This is, again, progressive muscle muscle relaxation by itself and the focused imagery was found to be more effective. You know those antiemetic drugs that are supposed to completely control or eliminate nausea, maybe vomiting? They don't always work. But this practice did control frequency, intensity, and duration of severe nausea and vomiting. This is a key one. This is, and it happened to be with women, but it's been found to be true amongst other cancer patients. But those who have dependable social support, not numbers necessarily, but dependable. In other words, people who respect whatever each individual's medical decisions are, health practices, and plus reduce chronic distress with daily relaxation practices. This was linked to dramatically lower levels of VEGF. There's that vascular endothelial growth factor that contributes to metastases, that contributes to angiogenesis. It's just a reminder that our psychosocial well-being is interconnected with these molecules, with our molecules, or molecular factors that are relevant to cancer and our health. And we understand this now. Science is telling us that. We take advantage of it. And you can take advantage of it for your better health and changing odds. I'm just showing you this because I mentioned to you that this practice of relaxation was followed up in many different settings with different populations even. And this, it was simply a single relaxation response meditative session that was a follow-up, was 15 minutes, to their earlier brief training. And it upregulated these genes with energy metabolism, glucose regulation, down-regulated inflammation. And I've mentioned kappa beta, and these are the molecular factors related to that. And it gave desirable overall results, reducing inflammatory response, oxidative stress, insulin resistance. This was another study. 15 minutes, a follow-up relaxation. It's all out there, folks. A different 15-minute study, completely different. So, these are women 15 minutes before they're going in for breast biopsy, which of course is anxiety producing. And what they found in this study, it was kind of like a guided imagery or very light hypnosis. By the way, we are always hypnotizing ourselves. As I'm coming out here and I'm sitting, in my car, in a parked car, driving at 2 miles per hour, and I'm never going to get there on time. In my head, I'm conjuring these people, they're coming out tonight, I'm not going to get there, I'm letting them down. We're hypnotizing ourselves. We always give ourselves instantaneous thoughts and images. So why not use that capacity in a way that really works for us rather than self-defeating it? It's something to learn. But anyway, so these women got a 15-minute pre-surgery, and it resulted in diminished anesthesia and pain medicine because there was less pain. Post-procedure reduced nausea, less fatigue, and other severe physical discomforts. It lowered pre- and post-op distress and anxiety, because now these women are waiting for the results, of course. And the interesting thing is, when they went back and looked at the numbers of the cost, it saved the insurance companies, on average, $773 per patient with a 15-minute pre-surgery. Now, if you extrapolate all the breast biopsies across the country in a year, think of what we would be saving with a simple kind of light hypnosis. There were studies with other surgeries that were more invasive, and if there was a general anesthetic that was necessary, they found there was a 30% reduction in blood loss and quick return of intestinal motility, meaning the intestines started working faster. Remember, when you have general anesthetic, everything goes to sleep. They don't let you leave the hospital until those intestines are functioning. Okay. Biobehavioral program. Again, all these work together in a synergistic way. You've got a handout on this, right? Okay, so just to say that it starts with fundamental You know, it's like eat vegetables and eat high phytochemical vegetables in terms of dietary recommendations. It's find a practice that works for you and make it your everyday. So there are different ways to do breathing or relaxed abdominal breathing. The only right way is the one that works for each of you. There are many that are dictated. Meditative practices that have measured health benefits, like mindfulness approaches, relaxation-producing meditation, then managing symptom side effects and its preparation for procedures. Relaxed focused imagery, systematic desensitization, I mentioned self-hypnosis or hypnosis. A key component to the biobehavioral sleep enhancement is circadian health restoration. So I'm going to mention briefly, I'm watching my time. And then after treatment, or even during, living well, thriving strategies, building, you know, what do you need to communicate to others? What do you want them to communicate to you or how? A guide for enhancing what we call the 18 support group. By the way, there's a book, Keith is listed as the author. It's called Life Over Cancer. I forgot to grab it before I left. But I think you have one here in the library. But if not, I'll make sure you get it. Because it really does go through the full integrative, like a map to integrative treatment and care. Okay, and in it we talk about 18 support techniques to reinforce neural resources, determination, cognitive training, shift from self-defeating thoughts which are calm, their natural, future adaptive imagery. How do you want to see yourself 5 years from now? Going out, many years. Implementing goals for personalized system of healthy drug selection. Okay, I am going to talk briefly about sleep. Anybody want to stop me? By the way, I want you to know, now this may sound bizarre, and I'm safe because nobody has any rotten tomatoes in there, but you could honestly throw rotten tomatoes in there, there's not any. So if there's something I'm saying that you object to, let me know. This is an opportunity in this size group to ask questions and have a discussion. All right, so how much sleep do we actually need? Well, gosh, the media perpetuates this notion that we're supposed to have 8 continuous hours of sleep or else. She's shaking her head now, she knows. Yeah, it's not so. A lot of the research, I am trained in a method that comes out of Harvard by the man who developed it and researched it, that is more effective and long-lasting than sleep meds. And so just to tell you that the best place to begin in terms of eliminating what are called negative sleep thoughts is to dispel some of the myths. And one of the myths is 8 hours. A landmark study, a landmark study, University of California, on 1.1 million adults who were considered healthy. They hadn't just emerged from a hospital or surgery. You know, you come out of a hospital, those hospitals destroy circadian rhythms because they are coming in at 4 a.m. to take blood, et cetera, et cetera. So these were healthy adults, is what they were saying. Actually, those who slept on average 7 hours per night actually had better survival, as in kind of less or whatever. That doesn't mean you're going to feel like sleeping 8 or 8.5 hours. But I wrote a blog, and I had a subheading that definitely sounded good. I wrote, "Don't lose sleep over losing sleep." But here, you know, everybody is trying to be so conscientious about health. And there's a tendency for any one of us to be lying in bed awake going, I took it those 8 hours, what's going to happen, etc. Actually, 5.5 hours is the minimal sleep we need. It's called core sleep. And the only thing that suffers really is mood. Not health really, not performance terribly, but mood. Mood can go down. Plus, of course, nobody in this room ever gets edgy or irritable if we only slept 5.5 hours. But that's another thing. So I want to spell the notion. If you sleep 7 hours, that's fine. If you end up needing 8.5 hours because you're rebuilding after treatment or surgery, that's fine, just don't worry, you don't get those 8 hours. Plus, it doesn't have to be continuous hours. We humans are known as multiphasic. That means we can sleep, say 3 hours, wake up after urinate or a loud sound wakes us or something, go back to bed, sleep another 3.5, 4 hours, 4.5, that's fine. There used to be a cultural norm called first sleep and second sleep, so it does not have to be continuous. I don't want you to be lying in bed waiting. If you go back to bed and you guesstimate, not staring at the clock, in fact, turn the clock to the wall if you can, set the alarm, but if you sort of have a sense that you've been lying awake for more than 15 minutes, get up, go out of the bedroom, go to a quiet space. You can listen to a recording for relaxation, soothing music. You can read a book, make it a print book, and don't make it an international thriller. And don't read the newspaper, please. And then when you feel drowsy, then go back to bed. And of course, you all know this, make it dark and be cool is as important as being dark. So if you're chilled, you can put a comforter around yourself, but you should be breathing cool air. So 68 degrees and even max 70 is really comfortable because our internal body temperature is coolest during deep sleep. So, no, you don't have to go to bed by 10. We're almost hardwired to be either what in research is known as owls, meaning people who like to go to sleep at 12:30, maybe even 1, wake up later. Of course, school and work and other demands make that not so possible, so circadian rhythms can change. Those are known as owls, and larks are the opposite. Go to bed early, wake up late, and feel refreshed. Now, I'm going to talk a little bit about my family, not because I think I'm interested, but I've had to deal with these variations, and I'm mentioning it to you. Oh, I'm sorry. Eldest daughter of 4 kids, a total lark. You couldn't get a coherent sentence out of her after about 9:30 or 9:45. Woke up at 5 in the morning, was doing her schoolwork, just listening to her. Youngest daughter, a true follower. And even when she was in her crib, so, how old was she? She was a year old. And she was at 1:30 making these self-soothing sounds, not fretting. She just fall asleep on it. She's still an owl, but she's a dog who wakes her up, so that's the difference. So sometimes you have to negotiate. You've got one person in the household who's an owl and one who's a lark, but you can kind of work that out. But there's no set time. That's what I'm trying to say. There is some information in terms of traditional Chinese medicine, but I'm not going to go off to that. Yes?
Why would too much sleep be bad for you?
I don't know if it's too much sleep that's bad. It is associated. And again, I don't know how the correlation exists. It's not causative. But there is a link that has been statistically sound between sleeping way much and depression and also cardiovascular issues. So it may be that those are pre-existing and that's causing, but again, there are times in the cancer journey when sleeping more is just a necessity. I do want to suggest about napping. If a nap is needed, make it a power nap. Make multiple power naps during the day if you can. But try not to sleep. Set a phone or an alarm for 30, 35 minutes because on average in 45 minutes we go into deep sleep and that might interfere with deep sleep. Most everybody here is too young and around to know. We used to call these Winston Churchills because during the Second World War we never slept through the night. But he would take these power naps. So you can take 20 minutes, 30 minutes, several times if you need. Again, I pass this out.
We're about just almost 8:05.
I see, okay. Let me just tell you quickly, that we do use these questionnaires I mentioned that has the Hospital Anxiety Depression Scale. And this is for a man who, this sort of reddish area is different on my computer, but anyway, this is trouble area. He peaked in terms of depression here. And so we all jumped in collaboratively. And you can see at his next visit, he was back in sleep. And so that's how we use these in sort of a traditional sense, so we can immediately collaboratively do something for someone who's in distress. Here's how we use it in a less organized fashion. But we use it to individualize. This is a sort of the numbers from the psychological assessments or the well-being assessments for a woman coming to us from Florida, so she had to get on an airplane. We were still in Evanston at the time, the center was. And a single parent, a child with severe learning disabilities, and self-employed as a realtor. Now, any one of those things could lay anybody low. But she had very low scores, only 3 on the anxiety subscale and 3 on depression. And we don't start monitoring until it starts to get 8. Okay, and above. However, when we come down to, this is the facet, and it's kind of a spiritual well-being scale. And the question was, or the statement was, I have trouble feeling peace of mind. And she clicked off on a 4-part Likert scale very much. I was able to walk into a room with her and say, you know, it's impressive that you have such high scores in depression and anxiety, but I'm concerned that you have trouble feeling peace of mind, and it's really hard to live without these things. So let's talk about how that would work in the field to see if we can explore some things all over that will give you great peace of mind. So that's how we use the scales. I don't know what I have time to do. Let me just tell you this then. Okay, I'll take 2 more minutes, and then I'll take everybody through something. Okay. A researcher who I respect a great deal, his name is Alistair Cunningham, and he had been a microbiologist, immunologist before he was diagnosed with Ph.D. So he went back to school and got a Ph.D. Said it was last. These days he's certainly too tired, but I'm not. But anyway, at least I've done that. He discovered in a neat study he did a correlation between how actively engaged a group, he's up in Toronto, a group of advanced cancer patients were with their self-healing. They believed in it and they put a lot of time and energy into it. And he talked about high engagement and low engagement. Low engagement were people who were apathetic, they might have come once a week to be psychoeducational sessions, but then they just went home and didn't really implement it. Then what Alistair Cunningham did is he had a team of oncologists who looked only at the medical emergencies, knew nothing about their demographics or how involved they were in self-healing. And they gave their estimate of survival. Well, what Alistair found out is there was a really high 3 different dance sessions. One, this is cha-cha class. We had line dancing and salsa. Great exercise, great fun. Patients and staff. Anyway, this woman in red said this was the first time, I think it was 9 or 10 months, that she had not felt like a cancer patient. Here's my partner, he's no better than I am, but you can see he's getting his chemo while he's doing it. He was working on a project in Texas and traveled back and forth. This was a neat story that day because she was in severe pain early in the morning. We sat down on the floor, talked about things she could do to diminish the pain, actual techniques. And then I said, why don't you sit down and just watch the dancing and listen to the music? And she said, no way, no how. So here she's dancing with her young daughter. These are people who exhibit what we all want. We all want genuine health. And for me, that goes in for all of us. It goes beyond just the absence of disease and the absence of severe symptoms. It's being able to engage in our lives with the greatest vitality possible in every dimension of our being. So I can end there. I have other slides, but I'm not going to have them. I'll give you the option. It's up to you. I can take you through something called progressive muscle relaxation. You do have a handout on comfort space imaging. And there are people you can go to, obviously here, to get different kinds of guided imagery. You can go on, I love Bella with Naprostep. Here you go. Bella Ruth Naprostep, do you know that? She's a social worker online, but you've got a team here. Talk to somebody about guided imagery techniques to reduce pain, to prepare for surgery, to get better sleep. I'll tell you how to spell her name, but you can misspell it as long as you get a few of the letters and write it. Maybe so many people will find it. Bellarruth, first name. Bellarruth, last name is Naprostep, Naprastk. She's a social worker with a whole cadre of specialists around her who have done recordings you can put on any device. And they're really good. I really like this woman personally and professionally she's doing. So that's one thing. Because she's doing this for a large population, I've given you a template on the mail actually. Oh no, you didn't. And I put it in relaxation. Sorry. That will help you to individualize. So if you go to her or anybody else that does it in a group, no. I should just pass these out. Okay. Divvy them up. The Nathaniel group. Think about these things. You don't need to write an essay. Yes?
Have any of these studies shown results for pediatric cancers?
You know, yes, but different. For instance, before treatment, surgeries for increased procedure periods in pediatrics, these children are so much more easily and they get relief. They also are very open to variations on the theme of relaxation and lots of benefits. Really. It's not just with adult cancer patients, and it's not just with cancer patients. It has an optimal relaxation and kids and adults. And there's so many complicated I love it. Okay. Comfort space imaging. Here's how you can visualize it before you go and get a good recording session. Because if you have to go into details and what you want, your brain is going to shift from a certain brainwave pattern to
do a more analytical style of functioning. And that'll be talked about. So, first of all, this is just to think about. What place to you suggests relaxation, ease, calm, beauty, health, serenity for a child? I once had to hypnotize my granddaughter, and I put her in a spaceship, gave her control. She loved it. She was going through all the starry, quiet. So there are ways to adapt. But it can be a real place, it can be a fantasy place, or it can be a combination of real and fantasy. So one of our patients, who was having trouble even with the prospect of chemotherapy, and intellectually was ready for it, told me that he wanted to, in his comfort spaces, go to this waterfall he had been to in the national park. And here's where we brought in some fantasy elements. He sees himself walking early in the morning, and I'll tell you why that's important in a minute. And he's walking at a leisurely pace to get to the sunpath, to get to the waterfall. When he arrives, and it's one of those perpendicular waterfalls that's very narrow, so the water comes splashing against the rock face and lands in this fresh pool at the foot of the waterfall. And when he arrives, there's a lounger waiting for him. And the lounger is covered with this wonderful cushion. And the cushion holds him, conforms to his shape, and he feels safe and so easy. And the cushion is covered with this really fine cotton. You know, that really almost silky feel of fine cotton against the skin, because he pictures himself in a soft cotton t-shirt and soft cotton shorts, obviously not today, which might sweat. But there you go. I don't know how many waterfalls you've ever been to, but I never found a lounger waiting for me, and I never got to there alone. So you can make this your place. You can bring in any features you want, any shapes, colors, etc. And in fact, the more detailed every single one of your sensory images, we know from neuroscience that those parts of our brain light up almost as if they. So I think what's next on your list is what time of year do you want it to be? Now, some places where people go and they're comfortable space, you can't see changing seasons. It's not visible. However, we all have associations, with different seasons. Some people love autumn. This one woman just loves it when the air gets fresh and cool and the brilliant colors of the leaves. And this man who's a teacher in a high school hates fall because he sees himself back in those noisy hallways with the lockers banging and everything. So again, what season do you want it to be and what appeals to you? And you don't have to write an essay, just generally, why early? And what time of day? This man wanted it to be early in the morning. Why? Because he says the animals are still quiet early in the morning, but he has the rest of the day to unfold in front of him. But if I was going to work every morning on the roadway I came in here and on the tollway, I don't think I'd like early in the morning because it was like this, and I thought, So I might want a different time in the day. And by the way, you can change this. You don't have to stay with whatever your first comfort space imagery is. And then I think the next one on the list is if you can look up and down and if you could turn your head 360 degrees around, what do you want to see? What colors? What shapes? Are there features? Are there rock, if you will, outcroppings that you like? Are there particular plants, trees? Again, you pick. What's the sky look like if you're outside? And what are the clouds? Are there any clouds? Are they soft? Cumulus clouds? What's going on? What's kind of, and this will also correspond to time of day. And then what do you want to hear? It can be very quiet, but you'll still hear something. What do you want to make your auditory experience? And smells or aromas do you want? We know from neuroscience that our sense of smell is the sense most closely connected to emotional memory. Proust wrote a book, Remembrance of Things Past, and the author, as a young child, had been very sickly. And he remembered as he walks into a bakery in Paris, and he smells these madeleines, little cakes that smell lemony and buttery. And it's almost holographic. It throws him back to those moments when he was in the kitchen and his mother's making these little madeleines. So what aromas do you want? One woman grew up with the smell of jasmine, and she associates it with her childhood being cared for. She lives in Manhattan now. You walk out of her apartment and there's concrete of jasmine. So again, what else do you want in this place? What else do I have? Do you want to see yourself sitting, standing, walking? If so, what do you want to see yourself sitting on or against? And then finally, I think on the list is, who do you want there? Do you want to have special people just sitting off to the side, taking care of themselves? If you need them, they're there. You can hear them talking softly or laughing. Or you can have them right beside you. One woman just wanted her dog and else living by herself. This is yours. But just think about this before you go and get one of these pre-recorded